joining us. I'm John Oliver. Just time for a quick recap of the week, and we begin with Syria. Until 2011, a pretty nice name for a baby girl. The Syrian crisis has been going on for years, and this week saw the latest attempt to intervene.
Secretary of State John Kerry is trying to broker a ceasefire between Syrian President Bashar al-Assad and the rebels battling him. Nearly 20 countries have gathered in Vienna to do this.
Wow, nearly 20 countries gathering in one alpine European country. It's like the Winter Olympics, but against all odds, even more boring. Although, I'll say, for the record, one country at the Syrian peace talks was conspicuous by its absence.
There aren't any Syrians at the table here at these talks. Neither any representatives of the regime nor any representatives of any opposition groups.
There were no Syrians there. That's like holding an intervention but not inviting the person who needs help. Listen, I just thought this would be a much more pleasant evening if Doug were not here. He's an arsehole when he's drunk, which he is all the time. He has a massive problem. And yet, it turns out Syria's non-attendance did not make things any less tense. Apparently, the Iranian and Saudi delegations hate one another so much, they were positioned such that they never needed to make eye contact. Which is absurd. The only things you should absolutely have to position yourself to avoid looking at are the sun, an explicit photograph of your grandparents making love, and this actual photo of Carson Daly dressed as Linus for Halloween. He looks like Sloth from the Goonies during a medieval leech bloodletting. Still, by the end of the talks, John Kerry clearly felt they'd made some valuable progress.
I believe the diplomatic situation is today more promising than it has been in some time because all of the stakeholders came to this table.
Wait, all the stakeholders? There were no Syrians there! Could you not even find one? Paula Abdul is half Syrian. How hard would it have been to fly her out to Vienna and put her in a chair? She might be good at peace summiting. She made peace with MC Scat Cat, and they were opposites. They were complete opposites. She's clearly got skills, that's all I'm saying. So let's move on. Let's move on to Ukraine, a nation that, like the human appendix and your grandma Mimi, you only really hear about if something's gone horribly wrong. Nothing funny has happened in Ukraine for years now, but they had local elections across their country this week, and they were surprisingly entertaining.
The Star Wars figure Chewbacca showed up at a polling place during elections in Ukraine. He was arrested with a struggle when he couldn't produce an ID.
In his defense, does he need ID? He's Chewbacca. Where would he even keep it? Wookiees don't have inbuilt pockets. But it gets even better. Not having ID was not the only reason he was in trouble.
He was campaigning on behalf of Darth Vader. That's the main candidate of the Internet Party of Ukraine. And it's actually illegal to campaign on election day in the country.
Yes. Chewbacca was also accused of illegally campaigning on behalf of Darth Vader. And if you are thinking, well, Chewbacca would never campaign for Darth Vader. In fact, the only time Chewbacca even interacted with him was in Empire when Han and Chewie met up with Lando Calrissian in Cloud City and wandered into a trap set by Vader and Boba Fett. Well, first, let me just say, I'm also glad that high school is over. It was rough, right? That was a rough time, right? But second, you're missing the larger point here. Darth Vader was actually running for mayor in Ukraine. And the arrest of Chewbacca was frankly not Vader's only hiccup on election day, because not only was he forced to wait in line, he wasn't even able to vote.
Я вам покажу, еще раз говорю. Я сейчас поеду в киевскую администрацию и узнаю, на каких основаниях.
Look, I'm sorry that Vader is annoyed, but I think it's now obvious that much of his intimidating presence was in the original voice, because Darth Vader seems much less powerful when he sounds like an irritable Ukrainian man working at a drive-thru. And so, finally this week, we turn to the United Kingdom, where I am fondly known as who? The UK's... That's so much truer than you have any idea. The UK's Prime Minister David Cameron has had a rough week as he attempted to pass a controversial tax credit reform. Controversial because of who it was likely to hurt the most.
It's estimated around 3 million low-income people will be affected, and many may lose up to £1,300 a year.
Who will be hit? Well, there's a very clear answer. Most of the pain will be felt by working mothers.
That is obviously disgusting. Not perhaps as disgusting as that time David Cameron reportedly stuck his dick in a dead pig's mouth, but still, disgusting nevertheless. The measure successfully passed the House of Commons, but then hit an unexpected snag.
A major blow to the government as its flagship welfare reforms are defeated in the House of Lords. Peers say the tax credit cuts punish the poorest workers unfairly.
Yes, the House of Lords told David Cameron he was being too hard on poor people. A place that looks like this, where lords and baronesses sit on fancy red benches and a man wields a giant golden mace whose only practical purpose appears to be smashing peasants. A place with a member whose actual name is Lord Purvis of Tweed. Even they thought that this smacked of class warfare. Now, as the Conservative Party realised the Lords might actually block their first finance bill in over a century, they started calling in reinforcements.
Very, very packed benches in the House of Lords today. We can spot some Conservative peers like Andrew Lloyd Webber, who we haven't seen in for a very long time.
It's true. Andrew Lloyd Webber, seen here in his pyjamas. Despite having voted only 30 times in the last 14 years, flew in from New York and voted in favour of cutting tax credits for low-income families, which must be one of the worst decisions he has ever made, right up there with using the name Rum-Tum Tugger for this character, which sounds like what a Cockney alcoholic calls a handjob. Now, I should note that Webber denied having flown in just for the vote, issuing a statement saying he was there to attend the opening night of Cats at the London Palladium and to work with the cast, which is clearly bullshit. How do you work with this cast? They're adults dressed as cats. What do you say? OK, Jenny Anydots, when Bustopher Jones says toodle pip, I really want you to keep in mind what Stanislavski said about effective memory. And remember, try not to step on each other's tails. A 5, a 6, a 5, 6, 7, 8. Act like cats. Act like cats all the time. I guess we should all actually be thankful that Andrew Lloyd Webber's vote wasn't critical, not just for the sake of low-income families in Britain, but because it means we can still be most angry at him for giving the world a shaved, shirtless Donny Osmond singing about Israeli children.
Children of Israel are never alone.
That may be the worst atrocity ever committed against the children of Israel. And now, this.
And now, the inevitable sad consequences of morning show anchors celebrating Halloween.
Halloween edition of Daybreak, we've all got just enough on to really put us over the top.
Yeah, I'm Charlie Chaplin.
Something along those lines.
Gotta get the gloves. You have the gloves.
I got some skeleton gloves on, making it work.
I have another 365 to think about you in that Batman costume, you hot little cookie.
That's right.
I love it.
Thank you.
Ooh, scary.
I'll get you, my pretty.
Oh my goodness! Are you some kind of headless person? Who are you?
I'm a headless person.
You look so cute, Chastity.
I'm super pumped about it.
I know, you're very excited.
Super pumped about being dressed up today.
My equipment isn't working as well when you sit down because I think it creates air pockets.
Come on, say hi, you guys.
Here we go.
Look at this. Yay!
This looks like just a T-shirt.
Let's go check in with Easy. Good look at your roadways this morning. Hey, Easy.
Hey, good morning. Some busy roadways out there, and unfortunately, we still have this fatal collision that's in the pickup stages in Yolo County.
Moving on, our main story tonight, elections. The only excuse for a grown man to kiss a stranger's baby and not have the cops called. As you may know, there is an important election coming up.
We're just about a year away from when American voters will head to the polls and choose the next president of the United States.
Can Ben Carson actually win the Republican nomination?
Can Bernie Sanders take Iowa and New Hampshire?
The biggest question right now is, will Vice President Joe Biden throw his hat in the ring?
Will Al Gore run for president?
No, he won't. And who gives a shit? It's still a year from now. By the time it's done, the 2016 election will have lasted the entire lifespan of a hamster, from birth all the way to popsicle stick grave. We should not be talking about the 2016 race when America has very important elections taking place this Tuesday. In just 2 days, there are gubernatorial and/or legislative elections taking place in these 4 states, and many other people will be voting in local elections or on important referenda, like Washington State's Initiative 1401, which would prohibit people from selling, buying, trading, or distributing parts of elephants, rhinoceroses, tigers, cheetahs, and pangolins. And if you're wondering what a pangolin is, let me show you.
The pangolin is not very ferocious. It doesn't even have teeth. And it's not very fast. In fact, it has to wobble on its hind legs and tail.
What is that ridiculous mess? It looks like the result of a stegosaurus making love to an artichoke. And look, if you're thinking right now, well, I don't live in one of those 4 states and I'm not a pangolin, why should I give a shit? Well, let me tell you, there are American lives at stake here, because a number of these elections could determine whether hundreds of thousands of people remain in or even fall into what's known as the Medicaid gap. And I know that sounds like a terrible clothing chain where you can buy khaki hospital gowns sewn by children in India, but amazingly, it's even worse than that. Meet Kathy Owen, a Texas woman who can't afford insurance, has a family history of colon cancer, and is desperately saving up for a colonoscopy.
$8,000 stands between me and maybe another 20 years of my life if I have colon cancer. But I find myself now, at 53, with grown kids, in serious need of help. Hard to ask for, but absolutely necessary.
That's just terrible. $8,000 should not be the difference between living or dying. It should be the difference between buying this authenticated bass guitar signed by Paul McCartney and this baseball supposedly signed by Kanye West. And, by the way, why does that object exist? Is Kanye West interrupting baseball games now? I'm gonna let you finish this pitch, but my signature is the greatest signature of all time. Of all time! And look, if your instinct is, wasn't Obamacare supposed to solve this kind of problem? Well, yes, you're right, it was. To oversimplify things just a bit, the idea was, under Obamacare, people without insurance would be split into 2 groups. Those who made upwards of 138% of the poverty line would be eligible to buy insurance with subsidies up to a certain point. And as for the poorest Americans, Medicaid, which had previously generally applied to children, their parents and the disabled, would have been expanded to include everyone else, at which point, with everyone insured, America was supposed to go outside, brush the dead leaves off the trampoline and celebrate with a backflip and a broken tibia. The Supreme Court even famously upheld Obamacare in 2012. What you may not remember is that even that very day, there were hints it may not have been an unequivocal victory.
John Roberts sided with the 4 liberal justices, voting 5-4 to uphold nearly all of President Obama's health care law.
And there's the problem, because nearly all is not a reassuring statement. Healthcare is like a pair of gym shorts. Even if it covers nearly all of what it's supposed to, you're still left with some problematic gaps and terrible things can happen. Let me explain. The Supreme Court struck down the part of the law which enabled the government to force states to expand Medicaid, which meant states could choose to reject the expansion, even though that would be an odd decision. Under the law, the federal government would pay 100% of the costs for the first 3 years, eventually decreasing to 90%. And I can't think of anything I would not buy if I only had to pay 10% of the price. Fred Claus on DVD? I mean, no thank you, but yes, I'll take it. Vince Vaughn is always good for 49 cents worth of yucks. Basically, for relatively little of their own money, states could cover all their poorest citizens. It was an exceptionally favourable deal. But guess what many states chose to do?
Texas will not be participating in Medicaid expansion.
They're working hard to change the American dream into the European nightmare.
This system we call Obamacare that we now see is going to be a train wreck, and I do not want the name of Mississippi emblazoned across that train when it leaves the tracks.
Would you consider expanding a broken system? Of course not. Of course not. It's like a drug dealer. You give them your first hit free, and then they're hooked for years and years.
Yeah, except in this instance, that drug addict has cancer, the drug being pushed is chemo, and the corner boys have 7 years of fucking med school. 20 states have so far declined to expand Medicaid, leaving over 3 million people in the Medicaid gap. People in the illogical situation of not making enough money to receive government assistance. Just listen to LaShawn Horde, a diabetic who at one point was forced to reuse needles to save money.
I don't make enough money to get the insurance through the federal government, and then I make too much to get Medicaid. And I cannot afford the insurance that's offered at my job. So I'm just hanging in the air. It's hard to explain how disappointing it is.
Okay, the word disappointing does not quite cover it. Disappointing is your child dropping out of college to be a street mime. Gerald, your mother's devastated. Do not pretend you can't hear me inside that glass box. I know you can hear me, Gerald. This kind of situation is not disappointing. It's fucking tragic. The frequent argument for states refusing the expansion is they couldn't bear the increased cost. Although it is worth noting that, to their credit, even fiscally conservative Republican governors like Jan Brewer, Chris Christie, Mike Pence and John Kasich did expand Medicaid in their states, despite being firm opponents of Obamacare.
I don't support Obamacare. I want to repeal it, but I did expand Medicaid because I was able to bring Ohio money back home to treat the mentally ill, the drug addicted, and to help the working poor get health care. Because you oppose Obamacare doesn't mean when you have an opportunity to bring these $14 billion of Ohio money back to Ohio, that's not Obamacare, that's Medicaid.
You know what? Good for him. Good for him, although it's a bit weird when accepting billions of dollars to give health care to poor people is somehow a brave and noble stand. When all Kasich technically did was see a dump truck full of money backing into his driveway and just not say stop. All of which brings us back to Tuesday's elections, because in these 3 states, they could determine the fate of Medicaid expansion. So let's start with Mississippi. Their incumbent governor, Phil Bryant, opposes the expansion. The good news is his opponent has promised if elected, he'll expand it. The bad news is his opponent is this guy.
Political experts in Mississippi were stumped when the long-haul trucker who ran no campaign to speak of and who was essentially unknown outside his own home was elected as the Democratic nominee to be governor.
Spent how much in this race?
Maybe $50, $60.
$50, $60 on the whole campaign.
Right.
No signs in the yard, no bumper
signs,
stickers.
No anything.
Gray's run for the nomination was so low-key, he forgot to mention it to his own mother.
I called him and I said, Robert, you running for governor?
And I was like, no, he would have told us. And she's like, no, it's him.
Holy shit! There is a difference between running a low-key campaign and not having name recognition within your own family. And if you're wondering how on earth he got that nomination, well, some people have a theory.
Some think it's simply because Gray's name was the first on the ballot. Others say it's because he has a traditional man's name.
He is a male, and this is Mississippi.
Oh, he is a male and this is Mississippi. It's depressing when that's all you have to say and everyone understands. It was an attractive goat and this is West Virginia. I get it. I don't need any more details. We're on the same page. It's pretty clear at this point Robert Gray is not going to be the next governor of Mississippi, so let's move on to Virginia, where the obstacle to Medicaid expansion is their state legislature. For anything to happen, Democrats would first have to gain 2 Senate seats, and one of the Senate's leading opponents of expansion is Dick Black, whose name, yes, sounds like a category heading in an adult bookstore, but believe me, he's considerably less fun than his name suggests. For instance, he once sent a thank you letter to Bashar al-Assad, commending him for his extraordinary gallantry in his war against terrorists. A letter Assad posted to his Facebook page. which I'd say was the worst thing he'd ever posted on social media if it weren't for this genuine Instagram photo of his windshield on a rainy day, which Assad actually tagged #rain, #morning, #photo of the day, #best of the day, #Instagood, #Syrian presidency. Assad abuses hashtags almost as much as he abuses the Syrian people. And by the way, Bashar al-Assad is not alone in getting surprising envelopes from Dick Black.
Years ago, when he was in the House of Delegates and sponsoring an anti-abortion measure, he left envelopes on senators' desks with little plastic pink fetuses inside.
Well, that is revolting. It almost makes you wish that Dick Black, who was running in Virginia, was legendary accordionist Dick Black. I'm sure he could find a great campaign song from his actual album, A Taste of Dick Black. A Taste of Dick Black. Now, is that relevant to what we were talking about? Absolutely not. But you cannot deny it's a nice palate cleanser after you just heard the phrase plastic fetuses. But perhaps the most striking election this year is in Kentucky, where they did expand Medicaid, and by all accounts, it has worked brilliantly. Kentucky has seen the nation's steepest drop in the rate of uninsured residents. Only an idiot would try to undo that. Which brings me to gubernatorial candidate Matt Bevin. He has been accused of wanting to end the expansion and kick people off Medicaid, something he denies.
You're hearing things that I'm supposedly saying, which in fact I've never said. I've never said I'm going to kick people off of Medicaid.
All right, OK, fine, you never said that. Well, I presume that means that this footage does not exist.
The fact that we have 1 out of 4 people in this state on Medicaid is unsustainable, it's unaffordable.
So if you were governor, you would undo his executive order to expand Medicaid?
Absolutely. No question about it. I would reverse that immediately.
The only rational explanation is that Matt Bevin has cloned himself and his clone, Bat Mevin, is even stupider than he is. And what makes his opposition to government assistance especially hard to take is that he heads up a family bell-making business whose Connecticut factory sadly burned down a few years ago. So what did this staunch, small government, free market advocate do?
Owner Matthew Bevin vows to rebuild, and he may be getting some help.
Senator Blumenthal vows to explore EPA grants for cleanup, possible small business loans, and potential resources from FEMA and other federal agencies.
Your kind offer to basically form Team Belltown is critical.
Now, to be fair, Team Belltown did not receive federal assistance. Bevin did, however, get a $100,000 state grant to reopen his factory. So if Matt Bevin ends up winning, I presume he'll give you health care as long as you cover yourself in bells and set yourself on fire. But the real irony here is that Bevin did not have insurance to cover the fire because he claimed no company would insure the buildings for a price that made sense. That's right. Because the cost of insurance was too high, he needed to turn to the government for help. And quite frankly, Matt Bevin, that should ring a fucking bell. And yet, as of right now, his race is considered a toss-up. He could win, just like Dick Black could win, and just like Robert Gray definitely won't. So on Tuesday, even if you don't live in a state holding an election, spare a thought for the people who do, because the results may ultimately affect the health of 500,000 people, and of course, one ridiculous-looking animal. And now, this.
And now, oh, sweet Jesus, they put the weather forecasters in costumes, too.
Now, there's no rain in the forecast today. We're going to be dry, but a little bit cold out there. We have these temperatures in the 30s in Kentucky.
Generally mild through the city and surrounding areas. 4 in Airdrie, 6 in Okotoks, and in Cochrane. Brick Creek still a little bit cooler.
We also have a couple of showers that are moving through northeast Nevada. Cloud cover. Some showers could move up along the Idaho border.
Certainly an improvement from a bit of light rain and even some freezing rain that we saw come across the region over the last several days for some communities.
And here comes the 7-day forecast. And we got a high of 60 today, 56 for you tomorrow.
And lastly tonight, we move on to China, a 3.7 million square mile panda fuck pad. China is one of the largest countries on Earth, and in recent years, they've seemingly been trying to get even larger.
Satellite photos of China gaining ground, island building to cement its claim over disputed territories in the South China Sea.
Whichever country plants their flags on these islands and reefs
could control considerable resources. It's also one of the world's busiest shipping lanes, with over 10 million barrels of oil moving through the South China Sea each day.
It's true, China is building man-made islands to claim territory, despite several other countries also claiming those islands. Although, to be honest, I'm pretty sure they are all going to be unsuccessful, and I'll tell you why. Janus and accounting don't give a fuck. The US emphatically disputes China's tactics, and earlier this week sailed a warship just 12 nautical miles from one of the islands, prompting this response.
A possible threat of war against the United States leveled by a top Chinese military official.
According to Reuters, Chinese Admiral Wu Shengli, in a video conference with U.S. Admiral John Richardson, said if the U.S. continues with those kinds of maneuvers, there could be a serious confrontation, quote, or even a minor incident that sparks war.
Holy shit! We could be going to war with China. And before you think China shouldn't make a mountain out of a molehill, I will remind you, they just made fucking islands out of the ocean. But before anyone panics, I may have a possible solution here, and it involves this man, Grammy-winning saxophonist Kenny G. Let me explain. Kenny G is a really big deal in China. In fact, throughout the country, his song Going Home is piped into shopping malls, schools, and train stations as a signal to people that it's time to leave. Seriously, this has been happening for years. Just take a look.
我听到这首歌，我就想起那个家的味道，我就想回家了。反正也挺习惯的，听着听着也挺好的。
代表着这是我们这儿都是4点半正常开始收摊放这音乐。
像这个就是音乐家是谁吗？
不知道。
吹内的人，这个人。
啊。啊。活着。
What do you mean is Kenny G still alive? Of course he is. The G is an immortal being untethered from space and time, floating endlessly on an eternal wave of pure smoothness. And frankly, is it any wonder the Chinese people love that song so much? Just listen to it. Oh, that is smooth. That's so smooth. It's like wearing a mink coat in a bathtub full of lube. It's almost impractically smooth. Listen, Kenny G is clearly our secret weapon. He has an uncommon ability to make the people of China stop what they're doing and go home to relax. If we could only harness that power of subliminal suggestion for good, we could all live in a slightly safer world. So, in the light of this week's events, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the future winner of the Nobel Peace Prize, Mr. Kenny G! China, I know you want these islands. I know you want them real bad, China, but I'm guessing you're feeling a whole lot more relaxed about the whole situation right now, aren't you? And I'll tell you why you are, because Kenny G is pouring liquid velvet into your ears right now. No one can start an international incident to this sound, can they, Kenny G? Can they, Kenny? No, of course they can't. They can barely move. This is like being shot with a silk horse tranquilizer. Anything else you'd like to add, Kenny G? No, I didn't think so. Because Kenny G lets his saxophone do the talking. And right now, it's telling everyone to calm the fuck down. That's our show. Our thanks to Kenny G for bringing peace to the South China Sea. See you next week. Good night. Play it, Kenny. Play it, Kenny. That is so smooth. That is so fucking smooth, Kenny. Oh, yes. It's like audio syrup. Audio maple syrup. I feel like I'm drowning in full fat